I feel like a lot of people have said the wrong things to me. That's one sister. Another sister in Virginia, she writes, I have been ignored. I have been ignored by many I thought to be my closest friends in fear that they would cause me more pain. So they distance themselves from me. Please shed light on the proper adab pertaining to this situation. Alright? So if a person has a miscarriage, and miscarriage, I think, you have the death of a child and people give their condolences, but if you look at a woman giving a miscarriage or a stillbirth, who gives their condolence? Usually it's like people just keep quiet, don't mention anything, and so she suffers in silence. And she becomes ignored. And then the community just kind of like pretends like nothing happened, let's go back to, normal business and so on and so forth, but the issue hasn't come to an end. So very few people will speak to them if they have the loss of a child. And if people speak to them, a lot of times the people who are speaking don't know what to say. So they'll say things that in many cases is, the wrong thing to say. They made a statement in, here or there, and it just intensifies the anger or intensifies the sadness on a person. I researched this topic in Arabic. And in Arabic, usually the resources are much more than the English resources, and even in Arabic, it is extremely difficult to find talk on this issue. If you do find information, what you're actually finding is like the fiqh of, a child when for example, do you shroud the baby or do you bury the baby? Kind of like some fiqh issues. But what about condolences? How do you give condolences? How do you comfort someone who's been in this situation? There's very little, in fact. And you have to go in many different areas and really dig deep to try to find this information. If you research online this topic, you won't get too many Islamic resources. You will get non-Muslim resources. And they're very beneficial indeed. But there is a critical element to the non-Muslim resources that are online. And that is they don't have the hidayah, the guidance of Islam's way of helping a person grieve. And I've noticed that in a lot of online forums and support groups, their methodology is basically let the person just grieve. However long it takes, don't judge them, don't say anything, just let them talk. And I've noticed when you look at the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, that wasn't the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, to just let a person talk, and go and wail and say whatever they want and so on and so forth. That was not the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. How many times that a woman would be wailing and the Prophet ﷺ would tell her to be patient. Isbiri wahtasibi, right? To be patient and, seek the reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what the Prophet ﷺ would say. You won't find that if you're just searching in online forums. Everybody tends to just keep quiet. And the amazing thing is the amazing guidance that Islam brings, that inshallah ta'ala will open up and show you what this guidance of Islam is for the mother and father. If you look to your right and you look to your left, this issue, if it hasn't affected you, it's affected the person to your right or the person to your left. Basically, about 1 in 3 people are affected by the loss of a child, either the child when they were born and they died, or maybe a stillbirth, or maybe a miscarriage. It is a very huge issue that many people, we're talking like 1 in 3 people. In fact, just in the survey that I did of people who are RSVP'd for this event, about 1,000 people took the survey that I sent out, and out of those 1,000 people, about 20% of them had experienced it. And then there was a second question that I added to this issue, and that is the issue of people who have lost a brother or sister, so the siblings. Because that's also another area, not necessarily that they've lost a child, but they've lost a young brother and sister, and how do they cope and how they deal with it. As you can see, that nobody really brings up those issues. Let me begin with something really cute and interesting, and I use the word cute. I don't know why. The Prophet ﷺ, when he would do like a lecture, for example, the men would come around, ask their questions. They'd surround the Prophet ﷺ. So the women were not able to get their time with the Prophet ﷺ. So what they did is they requested from the Prophet ﷺ a special day for the women to be educated. And the Prophet ﷺ acknowledged this and he designated a day. So Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that the women said to the Prophet ﷺ, give us a day to teach us. So the Prophet ﷺ went to them on that special day. It's just a lecture for women, guess what the topic was? What was the topic? Listen to what the Prophet ﷺ spoke to them about. Because you're thinking, or like, this is a group of women, what are you going to speak to them about? And the Prophet ﷺ said, any woman who loses 3 of her children, they will be a shield for her against hellfire. That was the topic. The topic that we're talking about tonight is the topic that the Prophet ﷺ chose when he chose to speak to the women. So the women asked a question. They said, Ya Rasulullah, what about 2 children? What if a woman loses 2 children? Will they be a shield for her against hellfire? And the Prophet ﷺ said yes, and even 2 children. In this topic, inshallah ta'ala, I've divided into 3 main categories. The first one is how to react if this has happened to you. How to react if this has happened to you. And the bulk of what I'm going to be talking about is how to react if it's happened to you. Because if it hasn't happened to you, you will at least know how to deal with it, inshallah ta'ala. The second part of this talk, inshallah ta'ala, is about how to console, how to help someone who, for example, it could be a family member, could be a community member. For the men, it could be your wife. For the women, it could be your husband. How do you console someone else who has been tested with this test? The third thing that we'll talk about, inshallah ta'ala, is how to prepare for the loss of a loved one. Because, see, here's the interesting thing as I thought about it, that every one of us, if we don't die first, is going to experience this, the loss of a loved one. Right? As long as it takes, it's inevitable. There will come a time in your life when this is going to happen to you. Unless you're the one who dies first. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us and enter us into Jannah. The things, in talking about how to react, how to respond, what I wanted to do, inshallah ta'ala, is explain what is all right. How to grieve, how to let out your feelings and so on. What is all right, and give you some guidance on that, bi'idhnillah, and some reassurance. Also, my goal is to ultimately move you forward. Meaning, if you've experienced this and you find kind of like the water pooling and you're not moving forward, inshallah ta'ala, I'll show you how to clear that and move you forward, bi'idhnillah. And in the case of a person spinning out of control, sometimes a woman lost a child and people try speaking to her, people try, giving her, be patient and so on, and she might find herself spinning out of control. If she goes to support groups, a lot of those support groups don't become a firm ground for her. Basically, they're like, go ahead, you now have a forum to spin out of control. And that's not what I wanted to do. I'm taking a different approach, and that is, inshallah, sometimes in this lecture, I might be a little bit tougher. So that, bi'idhnillah, a woman or a man that's been through this situation, and they find themselves spinning out of control, bi'idhnillah, as they say, the puck stops here. We'll give you some solid ground, bi'idhnillah, to ground yourself back to what you need to focus on and move forward, inshallah. Also, something that was really beautiful, with the survey that I did, and I asked people, just open-ended questions, I took some of those voices from around the world, people in the U.S., people in the Emirates, people, all around the world who have been through situations like this, and inshallah ta'ala, here and there, I'm going to quote from them. There's also some very strong brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers that have crossed paths with me in my life that I found them to be very strong. I've interviewed them, asked them what's their take on the issue and how they can, what advice would they give to the parents. So inshallah ta'ala, I'll be sharing that with you guys. Are you guys excited? Inshallah. All right. So to start off, what can an airplane crash teach us about patience? I want to take you back to November 12th, 1996. At that time, 1996, I was in Medina University, and I heard of this airplane crash. It was a Saudi Airlines flight. He was flying from India to Dhahran in Saudi Arabia. The captain of the plane was Khalid al-Shubayli, rahimahullah. This airplane had gone up at about 15,000 feet. There was another Kazakhstan airplane that was flying at 14,000 feet, coming kind of like almost in a direct head-to-head direction, but 1,000 feet below. The air traffic controller told the Kazakhstan Airlines guy to go down 14,000 feet because there's an airplane at 15,000 feet. Miscommunication, the person didn't speak English very well. He kind of like had a translator. he went to 15,000 feet.